A 72-year-old woman lives in her son's house, but he is rarely present due to work. Despite all the sacrifices she made for him in his youth, she now faces the indifference and mistreatment of her daughter-in-law. As the days pass, the elderly mother struggles in silence, hoping her son will one day discover the truth about her suffering. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us what city you're watching us from. We're continuing. I promise this will be the best story you'll ever hear. The golden light from the crystal chandeliers reflected on the polished marble of the hall, creating a visual spectacle that would impress anyone. The Southampton Yacht Club was packed that Saturday night, with the London elite gathered for another one of their exclusive celebrations. Laughter echoed among the white columns, while waiters circulated with trays of French champagne and sophisticated canapés. It was the kind of event where showing up meant as much as breathing to those people. Helen adjusted her navy blue silk dress for the third time in 5 minutes. 6 months pregnant, she felt every inch of the fabric tight against her belly, as if the dress insisted on reminding her that she no longer belonged to that world of perfect appearances. The heat in the hall was suffocating, even with the air conditioning running at full power. The dense perfume of the women around her mingled with the scent of imported floral arrangements, creating an atmosphere that left her slightly dizzy. Next, to her, Philip conversed animatedly with a group of businessmen. Her husband always knew how to present himself in public. Tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair combed back, he exuded confidence. As CEO of one of the country's largest tech companies, Philip Tavares was respected and admired. His smile was calculated, his words chosen with surgical precision. He knew exactly what to say and when to say it. Helen, on the other hand, felt increasingly smaller beside him. She tried to join the conversation a few times, but Philip interrupted her with a quick glance, almost imperceptible to others, but one she knew well. It was that look that told her to be quiet, not to interfere, not to spoil the moment. So she stood there still, with a forced smile on her lips, while her back ached and her swollen feet complained inside the heels Philip had insisted she wear. The pregnancy was not planned. In fact, nothing in her life with Philip seemed to have been planned by her. She had met him 3 years ago at a similar corporate event. She worked as an architect at a medium-sized firm, and he was there representing investors interested in a real estate project. Philip courted her intensely. Flowers every day, dinners at expensive restaurants, weekend trips. She felt special for the first time in her life, as if someone finally truly saw her. They married after 8 months of dating. Their honeymoon was in Paris. Everything seemed like a fairy tale until it wasn't anymore. The changes were subtle at first. Philip began to suggest she wear different clothes, change her haircut, or perhaps it would be better if she didn't work so much. After a year of marriage, Helen had left her job. Philip argued that they didn't need her money, that it would be better for her to take care of the house, that they would soon have children and she would need to be available. She agreed, as she always did. Now pregnant and completely dependent on him, Helen felt trapped in a gilded cage. A waiter passed by with a tray of canapés. Helen reached out to take one, but Philip gently touched her arm, a gesture that to others would seem affectionate. "You've eaten too much today, don't you think?" he murmured softly, still smiling at the businessman. "Remember what the nutritionist said." Helen quickly withdrew her hand, feeling her cheeks burn with shame. She hadn't eaten too much. In fact, she had barely eaten lunch, because Philip had commented on her weight that morning, but arguing there was not an option. It never was. The minutes dragged on. Helen tried to focus on the conversations around her, but the voices seemed distant, muffled by the constant buzzing in her ears. The dizziness returned, stronger this time. She needed to sit. She needed water. She needed air. "Philip," she murmured softly, lightly touching his arm. "I'm not feeling well." He didn't even look at her. He just kept talking as if she hadn't said anything. "Philip," Helen repeated, a little louder this time, "please, I need to sit down." Finally he turned to her, but his gaze was not one of concern. It was irritation. He quickly excused himself to the businessman and pulled her aside, holding her arm more tightly than necessary. "What is it now, Helen?" "I'm dizzy," I need to sit for a bit. You're always tired, always with some problem. He looked around, checking if anyone was paying attention to them. Can't you compose yourself for a few hours? Is that too much to ask? The words hit Helen like a punch. She blinked rapidly, fighting back the tears that threatened to fall. Sorry, I just need some water. Philip sighed, as if she were an unbearable burden. Then, go get water, and fix your posture. You're looking sloppy. Helen nodded quickly and walked away, feeling his eyes burning on her back. She walked towards the bar, each step a small torture on her swollen feet. The hall seemed larger than before, the people more distant. When she finally reached the bar, she leaned against the dark wooden counter, breathing deeply. The bartender had his back to her, arranging bottles. She waited in silence, trying to control the dizziness. Good evening. Can I help you? Helen looked up. The bartender had turned around, and for a moment she stood motionless. There was something familiar about him, something she couldn't quite identify. He was tall, with light brown hair and green eyes that seemed to study her carefully. A glass of water, please. Of course. He grabbed a glass and filled it with ice water, adding a lemon slice. Here you go. Thank you. Helen drank the water in large gulps, feeling the cold liquid soothe some of the discomfort. The bartender remained there, watching her with an expression she couldn't decipher. Is everything all right? He asked, and there was something in his voice that made her want to cry. She just nodded, not trusting her own voice. She placed the empty glass on the counter and turned to leave, but her legs didn't obey. The dizziness returned with full force, and Helen felt the floor disappear beneath her feet. Firm arms caught her before she fell. The bartender had leaped over the counter in a swift movement and was now supporting her. Calm down, you need to sit. He guided her to a nearby chair away from the crowd. Helen sat down, breathing deeply, trying to regain control. Thank you, she whispered. When was the last time you truly ate something? The question caught her by surprise. Helen looked at him, at those green eyes that seemed to see right through her. This morning. That's a lie, he said calmly. You're 6 months pregnant and clearly malnourished. When was the last time you had a full meal? Helen felt the tears finally escape. How did he know? How could this stranger see what others ignored? I don't know, she admitted in a low voice. The bartender nodded slowly, as if confirming something he already suspected. He grabbed a plate and began to place small sandwiches and fruits on it. Eat, slowly. Helen took a sandwich with trembling hands and began to eat. The flavor exploded in her mouth, and she realized how ravenous she was. Why are you being kind to me? She asked between bites. He didn't answer immediately. He just stood there beside her like a silent guardian. Let's just say I recognize someone who needs help when I see them. Helen finished the sandwich and took another. For the first time in months, someone was taking care of her without expecting anything in return, without judging her, without criticizing her. What's your name? She asked. The bartender hesitated for an instant. You can call me Gabriel. Gabriel. Helen repeated the name, feeling a strange sense of comfort. Across the hall, Philip was looking for her, his face beginning to show signs of impatience. Philip located Helen sitting near the bar, eating from the plate the bartender had prepared. His eyes narrowed for a moment, but he quickly composed his expression before approaching. Firm steps echoed on the marble as he crossed the hall, smiling and greeting acquaintances along the way, maintaining the perfect facade he cultivated so carefully. Helen, what a pleasure to find you here, he said in a loud, cordial tone as he approached, but the hand that rested on her shoulder was too firm. I was looking for you. Gabriel watched the scene with a neutral expression, but his green eyes remained alert, studying Philip's every move. Sorry, Philip, I wasn't feeling well and came to get some water, Helen explained quickly, her voice softer than she intended. You should have told me. I would have come with you. Philip smiled, but the grip on her shoulder tightened slightly. It doesn't look good for you to be here alone. She's not alone, Gabriel intervened calmly from the other side of the counter. She was just recovering from a dizzy spell. Pregnancy can be tough. Philip turned to the bartender, his eyes assessing him from head to toe. The expression on his face subtly shifted, becoming colder. "I appreciate your concern, but I can take care of my wife," he said with a smile. That didn't reach his eyes. "Come on, Helen, we have people waiting for us." Helen started to get up, but Gabriel placed a glass of orange juice on the counter in front of her. "Finish this first. You need the sugar in your blood." Philip picked up the glass and moved it away. "She's fine. Thank you for your attention." The tension in the air was palpable. Gabriel kept his gaze fixed on Philip for a moment that seemed to stretch endlessly. There was something in that look that made Philip feel uncomfortable. Though he couldn't pinpoint exactly what, it was as if the bartender could see through his carefully constructed mask. "Of course," Gabriel finally said, taking a step back. "Just doing my job." Philip guided Helen back into the hall, his hand firmly pressed against her back. When they were far enough from the bar, he leaned in and whispered in her ear. What was that spectacle? Making friends with the staff now. He was kind. I was feeling unwell. You're always feeling unwell, Helen. Always with some excuse to draw attention. He stopped in a more secluded corner, turning her to face him. Do you know how important tonight is for me? I have investors here, people who can make or break multi-million-pound deals, and you're over there at the bar, eating as if you're at a low-grade buffet. Tears threatened to return, but Helen held them back. She had learned not to cry in front of Philip. It only irritated him more. Sorry. Sorry doesn't fix anything. He adjusted his tie, regaining his composure. Now let's go back out there, and you're going to smile, you're going to behave properly, and you're going to stop embarrassing me, understood? Yes. Good. He smiled again as if nothing had happened. Let's go. The next few hours were a silent torture for Helen. She circulated through the hall beside Philip, smiling when necessary, nodding politely to people whose names she barely remembered. Her stomach churned, not just because of the pregnancy, but from the constant humiliation she felt every time Philip corrected her with glances or subtle touches that no one else noticed. During a moment of distraction, when Philip was absorbed in a conversation about startup investments, Helen allowed her eyes to wander across the room. She found Gabriel again behind the bar, serving other guests. As if he felt her gaze, he looked up and their eyes met for an instant. There was something in that look that made her feel seen, truly seen, for the first time in a long time. A waiter passed by offering champagne. Philip took 2 glasses and handed one to Helen. No, thank you. Pregnant women shouldn't. Just hold the glass, Helen, he said through gritted teeth, maintaining his smile. It looks better in photos. She accepted the glass, holding it without drinking. Another performance, another role she had to play. The perfect wife of the successful CEO, the woman who smiled in photos but felt like she was dying inside. The night wore on and Helen felt her strength draining away. Her back throbbed, her feet were on fire, and the dizziness returned in periodic waves. She tried to ignore it, tried to focus on the empty conversations around her, but her body was at its limit. "Philip, please, I really need to sit down," she whispered when she finally couldn't take it anymore. He didn't even look at her. 10 more minutes. It wasn't 10 minutes. It was almost an hour. Helen felt her legs begin to give way, and suddenly she was pulling Philip's suit sleeve with more urgency. "Philip, I'm going to faint." Finally, he noticed she wasn't exaggerating. Her face was pale, small beads of sweat forming on her forehead, despite the air conditioning. All right, all right." He led her to a nearby chair. "Sit here for a minute." Helen sank into the chair, feeling the world spin around her. She closed her eyes, breathing deeply, trying to regain control. "I'll get some water," Philip said, and she could hear the disguised irritation in his voice. When she opened her eyes again, Philip had disappeared into the crowd. Helen sat there alone in the middle of hundreds of people, feeling more isolated than ever. A shadow fell over her. Gabriel was there with a glass of water and the same plate of sandwiches from before. "I thought you might need this." Helen took the water with gratitude. "How did you know?" "I've been watching," he said simply. "Your husband isn't very attentive, is he?" The question was too direct, too personal for a stranger to ask. But something in Gabriel's voice, in the genuine concern in his eyes, made Helen want to answer honestly. "He's busy," she finally said, the automatic excuse she had repeated so many times. Being busy is no excuse for not taking care of someone you love, especially when that person is carrying your child. Helen looked at him, really looked, trying to understand who this man was, who seemed to care more about her well-being in a few hours than her own husband had in months. "Why do you care? You don't even know me." Gabriel was silent for a moment. There was something in his eyes, an old sadness, a familiar pain. "Let's just say I've seen situations like this before, and I regret not acting when I should have." Before Helen could ask what he meant, a voice cut through the air. What a touching scene. Philip was there, a glass of whiskey in his hand, and an expression Helen knew all too well. It was the expression he wore when he was about to explode, but still maintained enough control not to make a public scene. For now. Gabriel stood up slowly, positioning himself slightly between Helen and Philip. "Just checking if she's all right." Such admirable dedication for a bartender. Philip took a sip of his whiskey. "Almost seems personal. It's simple human decency." "Ah, of course, decency." Philip laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. "You know what's not decent? A stranger hitting on another man's pregnant wife." "I wasn't hitting on anyone." Gabriel kept his voice calm, controlled. "I was looking after someone who is clearly not being looked after." The words landed like a bomb. Philip's face turned red, his hands clenched into fists. Helen saw the exact moment her husband decided he no longer cared about what others thought. "How dare you?" He took a step forward. "You know nothing about me or my wife." "I know enough." Some nearby guests began to notice the commotion. Murmurs ceased, heads turned. Helen felt panic rise in her throat. A scene. Philip hated scenes. This would only make everything worse later. "Philip, please, let's go." She stood up quickly, almost knocking over the plate Gabriel had brought. "Let's go home." "Be quiet, Helen," Philip said without taking his eyes off Gabriel. "Mr. Tavares." Gabriel took a step back, his hands open in a gesture of peace. "It doesn't have to be this way. Your wife isn't feeling well. Perhaps it's best to take her home." As she suggested. "Don't tell me what to do," Philip advanced, but Gabriel didn't retreat. "Who do you think you are?" "I'm someone who won't stand by and watch a pregnant woman be mistreated." The crowd around them was growing now. Whispers spread through the hall. Helen saw familiar faces, wives of business partners, investors, all watching. The nightmare was becoming reality. "Philip, please." She touched his arm, trying to pull him away. "Let's go, please." He turned to her so quickly she didn't have time to recoil. His eyes were wild. All the control he so carefully maintained had evaporated. This is all your fault." He pointed a finger at her face. "Playing the victim, drawing attention, humiliating me in front of everyone." "I didn't do anything." The tears finally fell. "Philip, I just want to go home. Always crying, always weak." He raised his voice and now everyone was looking. "I can't take you anywhere without you causing a scandal." Helen tried to take a step back, but her feet tangled in her high heels. She reached out to steady herself on a nearby table, but accidentally knocked over a glass of water that was there. The sound of breaking glass echoed through the hall, which had fallen into absolute silence. "Now look what you've done," Philip shouted, completely losing his composure. "You are utterly useless. You're good for nothing." "Mr. Tavares, calm down." Gabriel approached again, his voice firm but controlled. "Get out of my way." Philip pushed Gabriel, but the bartender was prepared and barely moved. Helen was trembling now, tears streaming freely down her face. She could feel everyone's eyes on her, judging, analyzing, absorbing every detail to gossip about later. "Sorry," she repeated between sobs. "Sorry, sorry, sorry. Your apologies mean nothing." Philip turned to her again, and something in his eyes made Helen realize he had crossed a line from which there was no return. She saw his hand rise. Time seemed to slow down. Gabriel moved, but not fast enough. Philip's palm connected with Helen's face with a slap that echoed through the silent hall. The force of the blow made her head snap to the side, and she staggered, her vision blurring at the edges. Collective gasps filled the air. Someone let out a muffled cry. The sound of glasses falling to the floor broke the shocked silence. Helen brought her hand to her face, feeling her skin burn where Philip had struck her. Her ears rang, she blinked, trying to focus, trying to understand what had just happened. When her vision cleared, she saw Philip standing in front of her, hand still raised, eyes wide as if he himself was shocked by what he had done. But it was only for a second. Then the arrogance returned, the defensiveness. "You forced me to do this," he said, but his voice lacked its previous conviction. "You always force me to do these things. Lie." Gabriel's voice cut through the air like a blade. "She forced you to do nothing. You chose to do this." Philip turned to him, ready to retort, but then he noticed. He truly noticed where he was, what he had done, who was watching. Some guests had their phones raised. Others looked on with horror and repulsion. The social masks had fallen, and everyone could see who Philip Tavares truly was. "Put those phones away," he ordered, trying to regain some authority. "This is private, between husband and wife." "There's nothing private about assault," Gabriel said, moving to stand beside Helen. "Especially when done in a public space in front of witnesses." Helen remained frozen, her hand still on her face. Part of her couldn't believe it had happened. Another part, the part she had been trying to ignore for months, whispered that she had always known it would come to this. It was only a matter of time. The club manager appeared, pushing his way through the crowd, his face pale and worried. "Mr. Tavares, I'm afraid I'll have to ask you to leave." "You can't throw me out of here," Philip exploded. "Do you know who I am, how much money I invest?" "In this club." "I know exactly who you are, sir," the manager said firmly, "and precisely for that reason I cannot allow you to remain after assaulting someone on our premises, especially a pregnant woman." Philip looked around, searching for allies, for someone to support him, but he found only looks of condemnation and disdain. The silence that followed was broken by Gabriel's voice, but now there was something different in it, an authority that wasn't there before, a weight that made even Philip hesitate. "I think it's time for some truths to come to light." Gabriel took a step forward, and his posture changed completely. He was no longer the gentle, attentive bartender. There was command in his shoulders, power in his way of moving. He raised his hand, and with a simple gesture, 3 men in suits emerged from the crowd, positioning themselves strategically around. Philip frowned. "What's going on here?" Gabriel ignored the question and turned to Helen, who was still in shock, her hand on her face, where the red mark of Philip's fingers was beginning to appear. "Helen," he said softly, and there was so much emotion in his voice that she felt new tears well up. I'm so sorry I let it come to this." She stared at him, confused. "How do you know my name?" "I didn't tell you my name." A sad smile crossed Gabriel's face. "Because I always knew your name, from the day you were born." The world seemed to tilt beneath Helen's feet. She looked into those green eyes, truly looked, and suddenly saw something familiar. The curve of his chin, the shape of his nose, small details she should have noticed before, but which pain and exhaustion had prevented her from seeing. "No." The word came out as a whisper. "It can't be." Gabriel removed his bartender's vest, revealing an impeccable suit underneath. From his pocket, he took out a wallet and opened it, showing documents. He approached her, allowing her to see. "My full name is Gabriel Costa, your brother." The surname hit Helen like lightning. Costa, her family. She had changed to Tavares when she married, but Costa was the name she carried for the first 24 years of her life, her parents' name. "But you were dead," she whispered, her legs giving way. Gabriel caught her before she fell, helping her sit down again. "They said you died in the accident with our parents. I was 10, you were 14. They said no one survived. They were wrong." Gabriel knelt in front of her, taking her hands. "I survived, Helen. I was in a coma for months, and when I woke up, I had amnesia for years. When I finally recovered my memories, I started looking for you. The revelation sent shockwaves through the crowd. Murmurs erupted throughout the hall. The name Costa meant something in the UK. A lot. The Costa family was known for its empire in various industries, from technology to hospitality. They were one of the oldest and wealthiest families in the country. "Wait a moment," Philip intervened, his voice rising an octave. "Costa, are you saying you're one of the Costas?" Gabriel stood up, keeping a protective hand on Helen's shoulder as he glared at Philip. "I am the sole heir to the Costa fortune, yes. And you, Philip Tavares, made the mistake of your life by touching my sister." Philip's face went through a rapid series of emotions. Shock, disbelief, fear, and finally an attempt at recovery. He forced a laugh. "This is ridiculous. Helen never mentioned having a living brother. This is clearly a fraud, someone trying to take advantage of the situation." "Because I never knew." Helen finally found her voice, though it came out shaky. "I thought I was alone in the world. That's what they told me. That's what I believed for 17 years. Gabriel never took his eyes off Philip. "I found Helen 6 months ago. I learned she had married, and I began to investigate the kind of man you were." He paused. "What I discovered concerned me deeply." "You were spying on me?" The indignation in Philip's voice was palpable. "I was protecting my sister," Gabriel corrected, "and with good reason, it seems. The reports I received suggested controlling behavior, social isolation, possible emotional abuse. But I needed proof. I needed to see with my own eyes before intervening." "So you disguised yourself as a bartender?" Helen was starting to piece things together. "You knew we would be here tonight." "The club is mine," Gabriel said simply. "One of the family's many businesses. I knew Philip received an invitation to the investors' event. I knew he would bring you. So I positioned myself to observe, to be sure before revealing myself." He looked at Helen with eyes full of remorse. "I didn't want it to come to this. I planned to introduce myself to you differently, under different circumstances. But when I saw how he was treating you, when I realized you were malnourished and clearly under extreme stress, I knew I couldn't wait. And then he did this." He gestured to Helen's face. "And now there's no turning back." Philip was pale now, realizing the gravity of the situation. He looked around, seeing the phones still raised, the club's security cameras pointed at them, the manager taking notes. "This was a misunderstanding," he tried, switching to damage control mode. "Helen and I had a marital argument. Nothing more. These things happen." "These things don't happen," Gabriel said coldly. "Men who love their wives don't assault them in public or in private. Men who love their wives don't humiliate them, don't isolate them from their family and friends, don't control every aspect of their lives. You know nothing about our marriage." "I know everything about your marriage. I have detailed reports from the last 6 months. I know how you made her quit her job. I know how you control her finances. I know about the doctor's appointments you insisted on accompanying, not out of care but out of control. I know about the phone calls you monitor, the friends you pushed away, the family you said didn't care about her." Each revelation was a shock to Helen. She hadn't realized how everything was documented, how someone was paying attention. Tears ran down her face again, but this time they weren't just from pain. There was relief, too. She wasn't alone. She had never been alone. "Gabriel," she whispered, and he immediately turned his attention to her. "Is it really you?" "It's me, little one." He used the nickname he used to call her when they were children, a nickname she had forgotten somewhere in the years of loneliness. "I found you, and I promise I'll never let anyone hurt you again." "This is kidnapping." Philip tried a new approach. "You're trying to alienate my wife from me. That's illegal." "What's illegal is assault," Gabriel signaled to one of the men in suits, who approached with a tablet. "The club's security cameras captured everything. Every word, every action. There are also approximately 30 witnesses in this room, many of whom have already recorded the incident on their phones." He turned the tablet so Philip could see. The screen showed various angles of the hall, all with timestamps, all clearly showing the sequence of events that led to the assault. Philip tried to grab the tablet, but Gabriel pulled it back. This evidence has already been sent to our lawyers, to the police, and to several organizations protecting victims of domestic violence. You cannot destroy or hide it." "You can't do this to me," Philip exploded. "Do you know who I am? My company is worth millions. I have lawyers." "Who will destroy you?" "Your company is worth 15 million, Gabriel said calmly. "My personal net worth exceeds 2 billion. Your lawyers, however good they may be, do not compare to mine. And even if they did, the evidence is irrefutable. You assaulted a pregnant woman in public. There's no defending that." Helen watched the exchange, still processing everything. Her brother, Gabriel, was alive. Not only alive, but powerful enough to confront Philip, to protect her in a way she never imagined possible. "Philip," she said suddenly, and both men turned to her. "I want a divorce." Helen's words echoed through the hall, and the silence that followed was absolute. Philip froze, looking at her as if he couldn't believe what he had just heard. It was the first time since they met that Helen had made a decision on her own, without asking his permission, without waiting for his approval. "You're not thinking straight," Philip said finally, his voice taking on a tone Helen knew well. It was the tone he used when he tried to make her doubt herself. "You're in shock, emotional. You don't know what you're saying." "I know exactly what I'm saying." Helen stood up, and though her legs still trembled, there was a new firmness in her voice. "I want a divorce. I don't want to live like this anymore." "And the baby?" Philip played the card he knew would affect her. "Are you going to deprive our child of a father?" Gabriel stepped forward, positioning himself again between them. A father who assaults the mother in front of witnesses is not the kind of father any child needs. "Stay out of this," Philip growled. "This is between me and my wife." "When you hit her, it stopped being just between you two," Gabriel kept his voice firm and controlled. "This became a legal matter, and as her brother, as her family, I have every right to be involved." Helen took a deep breath, gathering courage she didn't know she possessed. "You never wanted this baby, Philip. You always made that clear. You complained about how pregnancy made me less attractive, about how I was getting emotional, about how it would hinder your career." "I never said that." "You did. Dozens of times." She felt the tears return, but she didn't hold them back. "You said I should have been more careful, that the pregnancy was my carelessness. You said I let myself get fat, that I was using the baby as an excuse to be lazy. You said that if I didn't recover quickly after childbirth, you would find someone who could replace me." Each revelation made the surrounding spectators react. There were gasps of shock, murmurs of disapproval. Some women had tears in their eyes, perhaps recognizing their own experiences in Helen's words. "You're twisting everything." Philip tried, but now his voice lacked conviction. He realized he was losing, that the public relations battle was already lost. "You're misinterpreting my words." "I wasn't. And I'm not anymore." Helen straightened her shoulders as much as she could. "You isolated me, controlled me, made me feel like I was worthless without you. But now I know the truth. I have family." She looked at Gabriel. "I have someone who truly cares about me, and I have enough strength to get out of this." Gabriel gently placed his hand on her shoulder, a gesture of support and pride. "If you try to prevent the divorce," he said to Philip, "it will be much worse for you. I have enough evidence of emotional and financial abuse to completely destroy your reputation. The videos from tonight are just the beginning." He signaled again to the man with the tablet, who swiped the screen to show a series of documents. "I have bank records showing how you controlled every penny Helen spent. I have your emails instructing your assistants to monitor her movements. I have recordings of medical appointments where you spoke for her, not allowing her to express her own concerns to the doctors." "How did you get all this?" Philip was pale now. "Money and resources," Gabriel replied simply. "When you have both, it's surprising what you can uncover, especially when you're investigating someone who was arrogant enough to leave digital trails of everything." He turned to Helen again. "You don't need to worry about anything. My lawyers will take care of everything. You will have full financial support, full custody of the baby, and if you wish, a restraining order against him." "I want it," Helen said without hesitation. "I want the restraining order." "You can't do this," Philip exploded, finally abandoning any pretense of control. "That's my child too, I have rights." "You lost your rights when you raised your hand to her," Gabriel said coldly. "And if you try to challenge this in court, I will personally make sure that every piece of evidence I have is presented. Every email, every recording, every witness. It will be dragged publicly in a way you will never recover from." The club manager approached again, now accompanied by 2 security guards. "Mr. Tavares, I'm going to have to insist that you leave now, otherwise I will call the authorities." Philip looked around one last time, desperately searching for something, anything that could salvage the situation. But there was nothing. The guests looked at him with disdain. The cameras still recorded, and Gabriel Costa stood there like an insurmountable wall between him and Helen. "This isn't over," Philip said, trying to sound threatening, but his voice trembled. "Yes, it is," Helen replied, and for the first time in 2 years, she truly believed her own words. "It's over for me." The security guards escorted Philip out. He resisted briefly, but realizing he was only making things worse, he finally conceded. As he was led away, he shouted empty threats about lawyers and consequences, but no one was listening anymore. When the door closed behind him, it was as if all the tension in the hall was released at once. The guests erupted into animated conversations, discussing everything that had happened. Some approached Helen to offer support, others just stood watching, absorbing the drama. Gabriel gently guided Helen to a private area at the back of the club, away from curious glances. It was a luxurious office overlooking the marina, where boats swayed gently on the dark waters of the night. "Sit down," he said, indicating a leather sofa. "I'll get you some water and something proper to eat." Helen sat down, feeling as if everything was surreal. An hour ago, she was trapped in an abusive marriage, believing she had no one in the world. Now she had discovered her brother was alive, that she had family, that there was a way out. Gabriel returned with a tray containing water, juice, sandwiches, and fruits. He placed everything on the coffee table in front of her. "Eat. Slowly, but eat. You and the baby need it." Helen obeyed, taking a sandwich. This time she ate without guilt, without fear of being reprimanded. She ate because she was hungry and because she finally could. Gabriel sat beside her, maintaining a respectful distance but remaining close enough for her to know he was there. "I'm sorry," he said after a moment, "for everything, for not showing up sooner, for letting you suffer while I collected evidence, for not being quicker to protect you." "You saved my life tonight," Helen said, wiping away tears. "If you hadn't been here, I don't know what would have happened. I don't know either, and that scares me." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of everything that had happened hanging between them. "Gabriel," Helen finally said, "how did you find me, after all these years?" He sighed, leaning back on the sofa. "When I recovered my memories about 8 years ago, the first thing I did was look for information about our family. I found out about the accident, about how our parents hadn't survived. I found out you had been placed in an orphanage." "An orphanage," Helen repeated bitterly. "They said there was no one to care for me." And it was true at the time. Our extended family had their own complications, and no one wanted to take responsibility for a 10-year-old child. Gabriel clenched his fists. "If I had been conscious, I would have taken care of you. But I was in a coma, so lost in my own mind that I didn't even know who I was." "And when did you remember?" "I started looking immediately. But traces from 17 years ago are hard to follow. You changed your name when you were briefly adopted, then changed it again when you entered the social care system. It took years of investigation until I finally found you. And when you found me, I was already married to Philip." "Yes?" He looked at her with sadness. "And when I started investigating your life, what I discovered deeply concerned me." Helen finished the sandwich and took another, realizing how much her body craved real nutrition. Gabriel watched with silent satisfaction, seeing her eat without hesitation for the first time. "Do you remember the garden?" he asked suddenly. "The garden behind our house?" Helen stopped chewing, her eyes widening. "The roses. Mum had rose bushes everywhere. And you were allergic to bees, but you insisted on playing there anyway." Gabriel smiled, a genuine expression that lit up his face. I had to stand guard, ready to pull you away if any bee appeared. I remember. The memories began to flow back like water after years of being dammed up. You built a treehouse. You promised me that when I got older, I could climb up. I finished that treehouse 2 weeks before the accident, Gabriel said softly. I never had the chance to show you. Tears streamed down Helen's face again, but now they were different. They were tears of recovered memories, of rediscovered connections. I thought I had lost everything, she whispered. When our parents were gone and they told me you were gone too, I felt like I had lost everything that made me who I was. I know. Gabriel took her hand, holding it gently. And I'm sorry it took me so long to come back to you. But I'm here now, and I promise I'll make up for all those lost years. What happens now? Helen asked, the reality of the situation beginning to set in. The divorce, the baby, where will I live? Everything I have is in Philip's name or was bought with his money. You won't need anything that comes from him, Gabriel said firmly. I have a property in Surrey. It's large, private, with 24-hour security. You'll live there while this process unfolds. I can't accept that. You can, and you will. Gabriel gently squeezed her hand. You're my sister, Helen. Half of the Costa family fortune is yours by right. Our parents left everything equally divided between us. When I was also declared deceased, everything passed to guardians until someone could claim it. When I returned, I took full control. But it was always yours too. The revelation left Helen stunned. I have money. You have more than money. You have a legacy. Our parents built an empire that continues to grow. Hotels, technology, real estate. You are co-heiress to all of it. She didn't know how to process the information. In a few hours, she had gone from a dependent woman with no resources to an heiress of a fortune. It was too unreal. I don't know anything about business, she admitted. I barely finished architecture school before Philip convinced me to stop working. You can learn, Gabriel encouraged, or you can do nothing related to business and just live your life. The money is yours regardless of what you choose to do with it. He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the marina. When I found you and realized the situation you were in, I was furious. Furious with myself for not having arrived sooner. Furious with Philip for taking advantage of you. Furious with a system that allowed you to become so vulnerable. You came when I needed you most, Helen said. It was the right time. He turned to face her. Tomorrow, my lawyers will meet with you. They will explain your rights, the options for divorce, and how to establish custody and the restraining order. I also have a private doctor, one of the best obstetricians in the country, who will monitor you and the baby from now on. Gabriel, this is too much. It's not. It's the least I can do. A knock on the door interrupted their conversation. A young man in a suit entered, carrying a folder. Mr. Costa, I apologize for the interruption. I brought the documents you requested. Thank you, Ferdinand. Gabriel took the folder and dismissed the assistant. He turned to Helen. These are preliminary documents. You don't need to sign anything today. I just want you to see what I'm proposing. He opened the folder and began to show her. Property transfer documents, bank accounts being opened in her name, provisional custody agreements. All this in a few hours? Helen was impressed. I have a very efficient team, and when it comes to protecting my sister, there's no limit to how quickly we can work. Helen leafed through the documents, seeing figures that made her feel dizzy. Her own bank account, already with enough money deposited to live comfortably for the rest of her life. Properties in her name. Company shares. I don't know what to say. You don't need to say anything. Gabriel sat beside her again. You just need to focus on recovering. You've been through something traumatic tonight, and you've been through continuous trauma for months, maybe years. It will take time to heal. Gabriel's words resonated deeply. Heal. She hadn't even realized how broken she was until someone offered the possibility of recovery. I'm scared, she admitted in a low voice. Scared that Philip will try something. He won't accept this easily. He won't have a choice, Gabriel promised. From now on, you have a security team. They will be discreetly present wherever you go. Philip won't be able to get near you. What if he tries to use the baby? Try to fight for custody. With the evidence we have, no judge would give custody to a man who assaulted the pregnant mother in public. Gabriel was categorical. Besides, I have the best family lawyers in the country. They won't let him harm you in any way. Helen nodded, beginning to believe that maybe, just maybe, she really could be safe. "Can I ask you something?" she said after a moment. "Anything. Why wait so long? If you were watching me for 6 months, why didn't you reveal yourself sooner? Why wait until tonight?" Gabriel sighed deeply. "Because I wanted to be absolutely sure. I wanted irrefutable evidence in case Philip tried to turn the situation against you. If I had appeared sooner, he could have claimed I was manipulating you, trying to steal your inheritance, any number of lies." He paused. "But mostly I hoped you would find your own strength first, that you would reach the point of saying no to him on your own. What if I never reached that point? Then I would have intervened anyway, but I believed in you. I believed that the sister I remembered, the brave girl who played in the garden despite the bees, was still there inside you. She just needed the opportunity to emerge." "I said no," Helen murmured, almost surprised at herself. "When he tried to make me leave with him, I said no." "And it was the bravest moment I've witnessed in a long time," Gabriel said with genuine pride. They talked for another hour, Gabriel sharing details about his recovery after the accident, the years of physical therapy and therapy to regain his memories, the journey of taking control of the family businesses. Helen shared her own experiences in the orphanage, the temporary adoptive families, the loneliness of growing up without family. Eventually, fatigue began to win. Helen yawned, her eyes growing heavy. "You need to rest." Gabriel stood up. "I'll take you to the property now. Everything is already prepared for you." "My things, they're all in the house I share with Philip." "I've taken care of that," Gabriel said. "I sent a team to collect your clothes and personal belongings. They'll deliver everything to the property tomorrow. And if there's anything you don't want anymore, we can buy new." Helen allowed him to help her up. Together they left the office and exited through the back of the club, avoiding the guests who were still in the main hall processing the evening's events. A luxury car awaited at the private exit. Gabriel opened the door for her, and Helen stepped into the most comfortable car she had ever been in. He got in on the other side and the driver smoothly pulled away. As they drove through the streets of Southampton towards London, Helen looked out the window, watching the city pass by. Every mile took her further from Philip, from the life she knew, from the version of herself that had been beaten and diminished until she almost disappeared. And every mile brought her closer to a new life, a life where she would have choices, where she would have family, where she could raise her child in safety and love. "It's going to be all right," Gabriel said softly beside her. "I promise it's going to be all right." 3 months passed since that night at the Southampton Yacht Club. Helen was sitting in the garden of the property in Surrey, her hands resting on her belly, which was now well-rounded in her 9th month of pregnancy. The afternoon sun filtered through the trees, creating patterns of light and shadow on the perfectly manicured lawn. Around her, the garden bloomed with roses of all colors. Gabriel had had them specially planted for her, a recreation of her childhood garden. There was even a new treehouse built with modern safety features, but retaining the charm of the one he had made so many years ago. The divorce had been finalized 2 weeks prior. As Gabriel predicted, Philip had no choice but to accept the terms. The evidence was overwhelming, and his own lawyers advised him not to fight. He lost all parental rights after a court-ordered psychological evaluation determined that his behavior posed a risk to the child. Helen still remembered the day of the final hearing. Philip had appeared with a team of expensive lawyers, but nothing they said could contradict the videos, the testimonies, the medical records, showing her state of malnutrition and stress during the marriage. The judge had been clear and direct in his decision. Now, Helen was free, completely free. "Lost in thought?" Gabriel's voice pulled her from her reverie. He approached with 2 glasses of fresh juice. "Just reflecting." She accepted the glass with a smile, on how much life can change in so little time. "For the better, I hope." He sat beside her on the garden bench. "Definitely for the better." Helen looked around at the garden, at the mansion behind them, at the peace she had finally found. Sometimes I still can't believe all this is real. It's very real, and you deserve every bit of it. The last 3 months had been transformative. In addition to the divorce, Helen had begun intensive therapy to process years of emotional abuse. She had a nutritionist helping her regain her health, a personal trainer specializing in pregnant women, keeping her safely active, and an obstetrician monitoring every aspect of her pregnancy. But more important than all the professional support was having Gabriel back in her life. They dined together every night when he wasn't traveling for business. They talked for hours, catching up on lost years, creating new memories. Helen had also begun to explore her heritage. With careful guidance from the family's business managers, she was learning about the various Costa ventures. She discovered she had a talent for interior design and had started working with the company's hotel division, helping to redesign some of their spaces. For the first time in years, she felt useful, valued, alive. "How are you feeling?" Gabriel asked, noticing how she adjusted her position on the bench. "Anxious. The baby could arrive any moment," Helen admitted. "And a little scared, to be honest." "It's natural to be scared. You're going to be a mother. But you won't be alone. I'll be here every step of the way." "I know, and that means everything to me." "Thought of names yet?" "If it's a girl, I want to name her Rose, like Mum's garden. Flowers." Helen smiled softly. "And if it's a boy, Gabriel, like the brother who came back to save me." Gabriel felt a lump in his throat. That would be an honor. They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, just appreciating the moment. It was Helen who finally broke the silence. "You know what's strangest?" she said. "I don't feel angry at Philip. I should, after everything he did. But all I feel is relief to have left, and gratitude that you showed up when you did." "You're stronger than you think," Gabriel observed. "Forgiving doesn't mean forgetting or excusing. It just means you won't let his anger poison you. My therapist says something similar. She is wise." They laughed together, and Helen realized how much she loved these simple moments. She didn't need lavish parties or social events. All she needed was this peace, this security, this family. A week later, at 3 in the morning, Helen woke up with contractions. Gabriel was instantly alert, having set up alarms in his room for any sound coming from hers. Within minutes, they were in the car on their way to the best private hospital in London. Labor lasted 8 hours. Gabriel remained in the waiting room the entire time, refusing to leave, even to eat. When the nurse finally came out with a smile, announcing that it was a healthy baby girl, he felt tears of relief and joy stream down his face. "You can see her now." The nurse led him to the room. Helen was exhausted but radiant, holding a tiny pink blanket bundle. When she saw Gabriel, her eyes filled with happy tears. "Meet Rose," she whispered, turning the baby so he could see better. Gabriel approached reverently. Little Rose had big, curious eyes, tiny clenched fists, and an expression of determination that already reminded him of her mother. "She's perfect," he said with a choked voice. "Want to hold her?" With extreme care, Gabriel took his niece into his arms. Rose snuggled against him, and Gabriel felt his heart completely melt. "Welcome to the world, little Rose," he murmured. "I promise you'll grow up surrounded by love. You'll never know the kind of pain your mother faced. I'll make sure of it." Helen watched the scene with tears of happiness. This was her family, broken and reassembled in unexpected ways, but family nonetheless. And it was everything she had ever wanted. The following months were a whirlwind of sleepless nights, first giggles, first teeth. Gabriel was a devoted uncle, often waking with Helen for night feedings just to keep her company. He hired a team of specialized nannies, but Helen found she loved caring for Rose herself. As Rose grew, Helen grew too. Her confidence gradually returned. She started smiling genuinely again, laughing unreservedly, making decisions about her own life without fear of repercussions. 6 months after Rose's birth, Helen was in her office at Costa Enterprises headquarters. Gabriel had insisted she have a space there, even if she only worked a few hours a week. The walls were decorated with her own design projects, and the desk was covered with fabric samples and sketches for the renovation of the family's next hotel. A knock on the door brought her back to the present. Gabriel entered carrying Rose, who was now 6 months old and full of energy. "Someone missed Mummy," he said, passing the baby to Helen. Rose squealed with delight, her little hands reaching for her mother's face. Helen kissed her on the forehead, inhaling that baby scent she loved so much. "How was the meeting?" she asked Gabriel. "Productive. We managed to close the expansion deal for Edinburgh." He sat in the chair opposite her desk. "And you? How's the hotel project in Cornwall coming along?" "I'm finalizing the last details. I think you'll like it." Helen turned her laptop to show the three-dimensional renders. Beach theme but sophisticated. Natural colors, lots of light, flowing spaces. Gabriel studied the images carefully. "It's exceptional, Helen. Truly exceptional. You have a real talent for this." The compliment warmed her inside. It wasn't like when Philip complimented her, always with ulterior motives or conditions. Gabriel was genuine. "I was thinking," Helen said, adjusting Rose on her lap, "maybe it's time to start appearing more at company events, representing the Costa family publicly." "Are you sure? I know you've avoided the spotlight since the divorce." "I think I'm ready. I can't hide forever, and I want Rose to grow up seeing her mother as someone strong, someone who isn't afraid." Gabriel smiled proudly. "Mum and Dad would be so proud of you." "I hope so." Helen looked at the framed photo on her desk. It was one of the few she had of her parents, recovered from the family archives. They looked happy, holding 2 babies. Helen recognized herself and Gabriel. "I have something for you." Gabriel took an envelope from the inside pocket of his suit. It arrived today. Helen took the envelope with one hand, balancing Rose with the other. Inside was an invitation for a charity event for an organization supporting victims of domestic violence. "They want me to speak?" she asked, surprised. "They asked if you would be willing to share your story," Gabriel explained. "But I completely understand if you don't want to. There's no pressure." Helen considered for a moment. Months ago, the idea would have been unthinkable. But now, holding Rose, knowing that her story could help other women in similar situations, she felt that perhaps it was the right time. "I'll do it," she decided. "I'll speak." And that's exactly what she did. 3 weeks later, Helen was on a stage in front of hundreds of people, telling her story. She spoke about the subtle abuse, about the isolation, about how she almost lost herself. But she also spoke about finding courage, about having family who supported her, about rebuilding her life. When she finished, the room erupted in applause. Women approached her afterward, crying, thanking her, saying they saw themselves in her story. Helen realized that her pain, so private for so long, could now serve a greater purpose. Months turned into a year. Rose was taking her first steps, saying her first words. Helen was thriving in her work, her designs gaining recognition in the industry. Gabriel continued to be her rock, her unconditional support, her beloved brother. One Sunday afternoon, they were all in the garden again. Helen pushed Rose on a swing Gabriel had installed, listening to the girls' delighted giggles. Gabriel was barbecuing, a skill he had recently learned and took very seriously. "It's perfect, isn't it?" Helen said when he approached with a lemonade for her. "What?" "This moment. This life." She looked around, taking everything in. "A year and a half ago I was trapped, scared, thinking I would never have a way out. And now look at us." "You fought for what you deserved," Gabriel gently corrected. "I just helped open some doors." "You did so much more than that. You gave me my life back. You gave me my family back." Rose shrieked, asking to be pushed higher, and both laughed. "And now?" Gabriel asked. "What are your dreams for the future?" Helen thought for a moment. "I want to expand my work with victims of domestic violence. Maybe create a foundation, use the family's resources to really make a difference. I want Rose to grow up knowing she can be anything she wants to be, and I want to keep healing, growing, living. Those are beautiful dreams, and I will help you achieve every one of them." As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Helen felt a deep peace settle in her heart. The path to this point had been painful, marked by trauma and loss, but it had also been a path of discovery, of strength, of rediscovered love. She was no longer the scared woman from that night at the club. She was Helen Costa, survivor, mother, businesswoman, activist. She was a beloved sister and proud aunt. She was everything she always should have been, free to be herself without fear or restrictions. And for the first time in her adult life, Helen looked to the future not with fear but with hope and anticipation, because she knew without a shadow of a doubt that no matter what came, she had the strength to face it. And she would never be alone again. Dear listeners, we hope Helen and Gabriel's story has touched your hearts. This narrative of overcoming and reunion reminds us that even in the darkest moments, there is always hope for a new beginning. Helen found her voice and her strength, showing that it's never too late to rewrite our own story. If this journey moved you, we ask that you subscribe to our channel so you don't miss the next stories we bring daily. Leave a like if Helen's transformation inspired you in any way, and comment below sharing your reflections. What part of the story touched your heart the most? Do you know anyone who would need to hear a message of hope like this? We have a special playlist with equally captivating stories waiting for you. Every story we share explores the complexity of life, human relationships, and the capacity we all have to reinvent ourselves. Your participation in the comments creates a community of support and reflection that benefits everyone. Join us on this journey of stories that transform, inspire, and make us reflect on our own lives. Until the next story.